So I'm here to talk about engaging culture and specifically how it's looked for me and how it may look for you and how some of you may be able to encourage and lead your congregations to do the exact same thing, to engage culture. So, 10 years ago when the Lord began to stir my heart and stir a passion specifically for the urban context, specifically for urban missions in me, I didn't have any missions training. I never considered issues like poverty or injustice or oppression or anything along those lines. All I had were my own personal experiences and knowing that God had met me right where I was at. All I knew was that God had reached me in the late 90s. I had my baggy jeans, I had my earrings, my tattoos, and I love rap music. And God had reached me in the midst of that context. And so I was the best piece of evidence I needed to see that God could come in and infiltrate and change somebody like myself. And that God could reach others in culture who are wrapped up in culture in the same way he reached me. I believe that the reason why the church typically doesn't engage culture is because we're scared of it. We're scared. We're scared it's going to somehow jump on us and corrupt us. We're scared it's going to somehow mess up our good thing. And so we consistently move further and further away from the corruption, move further and further away from the crime, move further and further away from the post-modernity, move further and further away from the relativism and the secular humanism, and we want to go to a safe place where there's people just like you and me. We want to be comfortable. I think we don't engage culture because we're scared. We don't want it corrupting our kids. We're scared. And I think we're scared because ultimately we're still caught up in a sacred secular divide. We're still caught up in the reality that everything is broken up in two, and if you go too far over here, you're going to get messed up. It's going to get on you. I think we believe that. We may not admit it. But what do you do when you got a young man who grows up in your church? In youth group, he was a powerful leader. He was impacting people all over the place. And he grows up, and now he's a member in regular service as a college student. He's killing it in college, but he really doesn't have the makeup of a pastor or a missionary. His aptitude is high. He should be a doctor or a lawyer. But then he goes off and becomes a doctor or lawyer, and he feels like he's on JV. Man, I'm not really impacting the world like I should because I'm not a pastor, because I'm not an elder. Right? He feels like he's on the junior varsity squad. What do you do with that guy? He's depressed now. He's a lawyer at a law firm, and he doesn't have as much time as he used to, so all he can make it for is Sunday service, and he feels like he's on JV. Sure, he's catechizing his kids. Sure, he's reading all the great Christian leaders of the past, the DOGs, my dogs, the dead old guys I call them. Sure, but he still feels ineffective. All he can do is get on blogs and give his critique from time to time on an article. And he's a lawyer. How do you create a sense of urgency in him to engage culture? I'm sure in his mind he thinks as long as I share the gospel in my office in some way or the other, I'm doing my just due. I think that happens because there is a split. There is a secular sacred divide that hinders us from impacting culture. And I love looking in the Bible at characters like Joseph, who was right smack dab in the middle of it. I love looking in the Bible at characters like Daniel. As a matter of fact, I want to look at Daniel, specifically in Daniel chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 2, take a look at this guy. What's happening, for a little background, is King Nebuchadnezzar's having dreams in chapter 2. And in his dreams, he's seeing that this vivid imagery. He's seeing vivid imagery, and at this point in time, dreams mean a lot. You know, for the cultural context, dreams bared a lot of weight on reality. They took dreams very literally. And so he needs his dream interpreted. But he's so convinced that this dream is vivid and powerful that he needs it interpreted immediately. He's got to understand what this means, and he doesn't want any room for mess ups. So he goes out and he entreats his magicians, his enchanters, and he says, hey, you guys need to interpret this dream for me. They say, oh, yeah, well, tell us the dream. He says, no room for error. You tell me what my dream was so I know you get this right. Tell me what my dream was. Now, historically, dream interpretation was a pagan practice. That's why he called on his magicians and his enchanters, his sorcerers. It's a pagan practice. It's not something that the people of God would typically do, this dream interpretation. And so nobody can do it. No one can do it. He says, well, I'm killing you all. Everybody dies. No one can interpret my dream. Everybody dies. Even the wise men that he's pulled in from Israel, which one of them happened to be Daniel. So news gets to Daniel. Daniel says, hold on, wait. He's going to kill what? He's killing who? Oh, no, we got to do something about this. I ain't trying to die. And so Daniel says, hold on, let me talk to my God. My God is capable of doing anything. He didn't say, man, dream interpretation, that's pagan. Guess we all going to die. He says, hey. He says, no. If anybody can interpret a dream, the God of creation can interpret a dream. The God who made dreams can interpret a dream. Let me entreat my God. And you know how the story goes. God interprets the dream. Daniel gives the dream to King Neb. And then we look at what happens after the dream is interpreted. Look at the response here in verse 48, 49. Chapter 2, verse 48 and 49, it says, then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over the wise men. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained in the king's court. Wait. What's happening here? Daniel goes and does this pagan practice of dream interpretation. He saves the lives of all these sinners and pagans, and then he stays to be an advisor for this wicked king. Why did he do that? Why didn't he say, you know what, king, I'm glad to help you. If I could, I'd like to go into ministry. If I could, I'd like to go just serve with the priests in Israel. If I could. If I could, I'd like to take my fellas and we'd just like to get away from all this Babylonian junk going on over here and break free of this. Why didn't he do that? Why didn't he separate? Why didn't he ask? Why be a blessing to this pagan infrastructure? You know why? Because Daniel saw his role as just as spiritual and godly and glorifying as the priests. For Daniel, there was no church time and work time. There was no separation. There was no duality in sacred work and secular work. All the work he did was sacred. Daniel felt like he was called to be there. That's what God wanted him to do. That was his ministry. He had what we would call a biblical worldview. That's what a biblical worldview is seeing the world through God's lenses. Right? The Nehemiah Institute, who tests on biblical worldviews, has some interesting statistics here. It says 4% of all Americans have a biblical worldview. 4%. They say 10% of Christians see life through a biblical lens. 10%. It says 38% of American adults believe the whole Bible, including the Old Testament, was written decades after Jesus' death. 38% didn't know Isaiah was in the Old Testament. 49% believe the Bible teaches that money is the root of all evil. If you don't know that one, ask your pastor. 12%, it's my favorite, 12% believe Joan of Arc is Noah's wife. That's what we're dealing with here, man. That's what we're dealing with. See, we tend to have these bifocals that see life as half sacred, half spiritual, and we don't think the Bible has any bearings on the rest of our lives, on every aspect of life. So how do we engage culture if the Bible's just for church? How do we engage culture if the Bible is just to create elders? How do we become citizens in this world? How do we raise them up to invade this world for the name of Jesus? Well, first of all, we got to figure out, where did this great divide come from? How did it even come about? Right? There's this split, and we all see it. Most of us grew up with it, right? This sacred secular divide. We grew up in this. I did. I remember growing up with my parents and my family saying, there's some things you do on Sunday, and there's some things you don't do on Sunday. I remember this. I remember riding in a car with my homeboy Chris. I would go to jail if I told you some of the stuff we did. But we were riding, and I remember we were listening to Dr. Dre, and Snoop was being misogynistic, as he does, and cussing everybody out, and we drove past the church, and my man Chris turned the radio down. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, we drove past the church, bro. We got to be respectful." And at the time, I'm like, all right, that makes perfect sense. But it's as if God doesn't own every stretch of highway we're driving down. He just owns those couple acres where the church is. That's the mentality that we're brought up with. I remember driving to church on Sunday, and on Sunday, on the way to church, we listened to Christian radio or gospel music. But as soon as we're out, we could put it back on whatever radio station we wanted to. The drive to church was sacred. The drive home is free game. Do whatever we want to do. That's the mentality, the sacred secular, the fractured perspective that we have on our lives. In church and family, they don't speak to our work in our public life. It's just private for a lot of us. And so we navigate in two separate worlds, and we teach people to navigate in two separate worlds. And so what's happening is even non-believers pick this up. Even they become religious. Right? Like they say, don't do this here and do this here. I wish I had a dime for how many times I get in a conversation with somebody and, we're talking and they're talking about all kind of stuff, and then they find out I'm a Christian. They're like, I don't mean to cuss, man. It's like, I'm cool. It doesn't bother me. I'm here to be a friend, to, build relationship. And so what they're doing is they're following our pattern of religion. And I think what's funny is a lot of other religions get it right in this area. See, most other religions not only teach you how to be right with God, well, their version of how to be right with God, but they also teach you how to view the world around you. Right? There's some bearing on every other aspect of life. They teach you how to interpret the world. Right? So Islam is invading politics, and Islam is invading dress, and Islam is every other aspect of the world. And Christians, we get it right in terms of how to be right with God, but we have no clue how to interpret the world around us. We're great at the first function. We're great at talking about salvation and sanctification. We are clueless when it comes to art and ethics and science and culture. How do we navigate through all that? Nancy Pearcey, in her book, Total Truth, she writes, Christianity is total truth, not just religious truth. It's the truth about everything. Right? Like, it's how we deal with politics. It's how we deal with science. It's how we deal with TV and art. We can't leave people to their own devices. And I know, because as an artist, I know that Christians have no idea how to deal with art. They say, hey, Lecrae, you can't do that. That's bad. That's secular. You can't touch that. Hey, Lecrae, your engineer is not a Christian. He can't mix your stuff. He's going to get sinner cooties on it. This is real. I wish I was making this up. But this is the reality that we live in. And so what we do is we just demonize everything. If it doesn't fit in the category of salvation and sanctification, it must be evil. Politics, devil, don't touch it. That's how we think. Right? We don't have a philosophy or a filter for much of this. And I have some friends who are Christians. Some of you buy their albums. They're big pop stars and singers and artists, and they're Christians, and they have no idea how to navigate their careers through a biblical lens. It's sad. I have a friend who's a very popular singer, and someone asked her a question about homosexuality, and she deferred to her PR company. Hey, what do I say? What does the Bible say? She had no clue how to navigate that. No clue to just say, hey, we're all people in need of grace. You know, we talked about it earlier today. Homosexuality doesn't send you to hell. You being apart from Jesus, you were born in unrighteousness. You were born in sin. That's why you go to hell. No clue how to navigate that question. And so it comes off as, oh, I love everybody. And God does too. And she leaves it there. What a moment to influence. What a moment to engage without a clue how to navigate that. So what do? Right? What we're doing when we don't know how to navigate and engage culture, we're missing out on Jesus' power of redemption, on Jesus' power of glorification. He's redeemed us, and we can go into this world and be a demonstration of what that redemption looks like. I'm not talking about creating some utopian earth and moving toward redeeming things, and so it looks like, hey, here's heaven now. But what I'm talking about is being a demonstration of what redemption has done to us. Us putting our hands on things that have typically been used for evil and showing the world how they can be used for God's glory. That's what he's created us to do. And so I want to talk about that. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the redeemable, right? Because that's how we're going to be able to effectively engage culture. So what's good? Like, what is good? Right? What happened historically is the Greeks, specifically Plato, he thought that matter was pre-existing the creator. And so because it pre-existed the creator, it was evil. He thought it contained the ability to resist God. So it had to be evil. So all things matter, made of wood and skin, are evil. And this idea permeated things. But as Christians, we can defeat that claim by saying, no, only God is pre-existing. Right? We can defeat that claim by saying that he is the creator of all things. Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord and all it contains. It's all his. Genesis, we see God creating, and then what does he say? It's good. He creates and he says it's good. He creates and he says it's good. So things are not inherently evil. They're not inherently bad. So what is good? 1 Timothy 4:4, everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it's received with thanksgiving. Guess what? Dancing is good. Not a lot of Baptists in here. Cool. Pants are good. If you're married in here, you know sex is good. It's good. These things are good. They're not inherently evil. So things are not bad, and you're not more spiritual by avoiding them. You're not more godly by avoiding things. They in and of themselves are not bad. And you're not going to be able to engage culture if all you do is try to avoid things. So what Daniel was doing, interpreting dreams, this is pagan. That's bad. No, he's using it to the glory of God. So, that's how I function. That's been the way I've been able to navigate in the art world. In the music world is realizing that, yes, this may have been created for bad purposes. Yes, this building may have been a pornography shop at one point in time, but we're going to gut it out and we're going to build a studio in there. And we're not going to believe that any evil spirits were in the bricks and are going to jump into our songs. God made bricks, God made the matter, and it's good, and we're going to use it for good. And so what's bad then? What's bad? Well, if you can understand creation and that all things are made by God are good, well, we got to understand what's bad. Well, a fall happened, right? Adam sinned. Things didn't rebel against God. The trees didn't say, God, we don't want to listen to you anymore. Humanity did that. Humanity fell. Humanity fell. And so now the world is affected by human sin. Everything is affected by humanity's sin. We know the Bible tells us that our hearts are deceitful. Now humanity's hearts are sinful, and we're affecting everything. We're jacking everything up. Francis Schaeffer calls it the consequence of authority. right? So a man is the authority over a house, but if he's lazy because he's sinful and he doesn't clean up, of course the house is going to look decrepit and haunted and all jacked up. It's not the house's fault it looks crazy, it's that man's fault, right? If you own a company, if you're the CEO and you're sinful and you're a liar and you're a cheat, then that's going to reflect the company, right? It's not that the company in and of itself is evil, some evil empire. It's that there are sinful hearts dictating what happens there. That's the problem. And what we need is somebody to engage those sinful hearts. We need somebody to be in there addressing that and wrestling through that. And so Paul in Romans 14:14, he says, nothing is unclean in and of itself. It becomes unclean when sinners use it to express their rebellion against God. Right? Like, I had a butcher knife in my hand. Most of you guys think, oh, I'm a black man with a butcher knife, it's all bad. But I mean, typically you're going to think murder, Jason, Freddy, something along those lines, because that's what culture has done. We've directed things that way. But that's not what it was structured for. We can take that and use that for the glorification of God. We can take that butcher knife and cut up food and serve it to the homeless. The knife isn't evil. If I had a dime for how many people say, oh, you've got a skull on your shirt. I got a skull in my head. Is that evil too? Things are not in and of themselves evil. It's structure and direction. We are structuring. God has structured things for his glory and his goodness, and humanity is directing it in evil or good ways. And if you're going to engage culture, then it's about taking the things and not being scared of these things and saying, how can I direct them in good ways? If you've got people who are not going to be elders in your church, you got to think through, how can you be a lawyer and structure law in a way that glorifies God? How can you be a doctor and structure being a doctor in a way that glorifies God? How can you be an accountant and structure that in a way that glorifies God? That's ministry. That's service as unto the Lord. That's engaging the world and the culture around. I would love to see a lawyer say, hey, listen, you know, I know you're lying. I know you're lying and I want to help you. See, I'm a firm believer that lying is not going to get us out of this situation. As a matter of fact, you know, there's an eternal law that we're violating. We're talking about law here. I love to see a lawyer who says, you know what, I'm going to go up against some of these unjust practices. That's ministry. Right? How are we training people up for that? And so then there's the redeemable, right? And again, right, when I say redeem, it's to make something that was unpleasant or unacceptable acceptable. I'm not saying let's redeem the world and create this utopian planet. I'm saying let's demonstrate what Jesus has done in us so the world may see a new way. The world may see God's way, Jesus' way. A picture of the redemption that Jesus has done in us. And so Jesus redeems us, and we desire to go into the world and demonstrate that so others can see what redemption looks like. The Bible talks about redeeming the time. It's using the time that we've been given in a new way, in a God-honoring way. Right? It's being fruitful. It's doing what Genesis has called us to do, right? Genesis tells us to be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, to be cultivators, to take raw materials and create incredible things out of them, things that honor and glorify God. Right? That's what God has called us to do. It's our cultural mandate. Go build things, go design things, go out into this world and impact the world for the sake of Jesus. I live in Atlanta, and I live in Atlanta because I'm a hip-hop artist, and I live in Atlanta because Ludacris lives in Atlanta. No, I'm serious. And because T.I. lives in Atlanta, and because Lil Wayne comes to Atlanta to hang out all the time, and because Rick Ross's engineers are in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta because I'm from that world, and I can engage that world, and I can go to these studios, and I can have conversations, and I can wrestle with things back and forth with them. But if I was scared that would somehow jump on me and corrupt what I'm doing, I'm rendered ineffective. If I was to just be under the auspices that, man, I should just be a teacher at a seminary or a pastor and that's it, they would never hear the truths God has invested in me. And so that's why I'm there. You know, and I love what Keller says. He says we don't just need evangelistic Christians. We need missional Christians. We need people who are on mission. You know, and that's how I view my art. There's a great quote by Steve Turner, who wrote this book called Imagine, and it talks about the art specifically. And maybe you can use this as it pertains to different areas that you're raising people up in your church. But he says this. He says, one of the great hindrances to the development of biblically informed mainstream art has been the perception that Christians should make Christian art, and that Christian art is always explicitly religious. Understood this way, Christian art is not distinguished by a regenerated outlook on the whole of life, but a narrow focus on Bible stories, saints, martyrs, and the individual's relationship with God. Christian art in this sense is either usually an aid to worship or a means of evangelism. See, when we limit our cultural mandate to just this, we miss out on engaging culture. When we don't do songs about marriage, about violence, about relationships, about just being grateful for breath, the world doesn't hear an alternative perspective on that. If all we do is talk about sanctification and salvation, and praise God for them both, I'm not saying we diminish those, but if that's it, that's all the world gets a perspective on. And so the areas of marriage, the areas of science, the areas of art, the areas of justice, the areas of politics go untouched by a biblical worldview. All we know how to do is tell you how to get saved and live right. That's not what Jesus created us for. That's not the picture of redemption that he gave us. It's not us glorifying him in every aspect of life. So there's just three things. If I could tell you three things I would love for you to do. Just three things. One, engage culture. Engage culture. Teach people to engage culture. When I say that, I mean this is the act of knowing the people. It's knowing the language, the values, the ideals, and being able to speak a language and culturally contextualize. I mean, we know what Paul did on Mars Hill. We know he went to the synagogue, he went to the marketplace, and then he went to Mars Hill. We've seen this. We've seen him articulate the values and the ideals of the people at that time. You've got to engage culture. Learn how to have a conversation. Right? Sit on a plane next to somebody and talk about something. Be interested in them, their desires, their values, their ideals. Don't just sit there waiting to pull the trigger. Is it now? Is it now? Give them the gospel now? Is it gospel time? Is it gospel time? Is it gospel? I can't take it anymore. Pow, 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 pow. Engage. You may learn something. Love. The second one is love the people in the culture. Love them. Love them. And when I say that, I mean most people are scared or intimidated by worldviews that they don't understand, by paradigms they don't understand. They're fearful of them, right? They see these people as a cesspool of just disgustingness and all kind of weird junk that they don't want to be involved in, and they're scared it's going to affect them and their kids, and they don't want to be a part of it. But you've got to love these people. They can't be projects that you hope somebody can get to. You've got to see them as souls that matter. So, amen. Thirdly, rehabilitate the culture. I got an album called Rehab. It's just a selfish plug. That's just why I did that. No, but sincerely, rehabilitate or redeem. You know, I use that word carefully because I know what it can tend to mean for people. But what I'm saying again, I'm not talking about trying to create heaven on earth. I'm saying go and paint a picture of what it looks like when Jesus radically changes people. Go in there and love people who don't expect love, and build things that people don't expect you to build, and do taxes for free, right? Don't move in my hood and build another coffee shop. Do some AIDS testing. So this is what it looks like to rehabilitate, to redeem. God gives us this mandate to subdue and cultivate. We're here to demonstrate what Jesus has done to us and to let the world see a radically different picture on marriage, on relationships, on finances. We're here to paint a picture of what it looks like when God gets a hold of us, what it looks like when Jesus changes us. I want you to engage the culture. I want you to love the people in the culture and rehabilitate it. Redeem it. You know, we look at Daniel again, and we just see he was mindful of all those magicians and sorcerers. He didn't want them to perish either. He wasn't just saving his own skin. He was fighting for the redemption of their lives. Right? We see that the interpretation was used for God's purposes. Because all knowledge belongs to God in the first place. We see like God is glorified. We see God putting him in a strategic position to influence the culture at large. That's what we need to be doing. That's what he's put us here for. And with this sacred secular split, pastors and missionaries, they become varsity. And everybody who's not in full-time ministry is on JV somehow. That's not a picture. That's not a picture of what the kingdom looks like. Right? We need lawyers and accountants and engineers and teachers to be infiltrating culture. We need to reflect this holy love, reflect what God has done in and through us. Right? And so I say all this to say, at the end of the day, you know, it's a process. You're not going to get it right. I don't get it right all the time. You know, I made it my latest CD, and, you know, there's people singing who don't love Jesus, but guess what? I get to have great conversations with them about Jesus. There's people producing who don't love Jesus, but they're blown away at how I can use gifting and skill sets to honor God and to paint a different picture of what God has done in different areas of life. That's what this world needs to see. When God redeems us, he frees us from the guilt and the power of sin. We're restored, in a sense, to humanity, to live the way we were created, to honor him and to glorify him. And because of Christ's redemption on the cross, our work has a new face. It looks different now. It's not just tedious and toilsome for the sake of being tedious and toilsome. Right? Our minds are renewed. Our hearts are redirected. We have a glorious role now in demonstrating what Jesus has done in and through us. And so we get to serve God by serving humanity. We cultivate our talents and we steward our abilities, and we do people's taxes, like I was saying, and we wash their clothes, and we join the NAACP, and we join, you know, different organizations that allow us to be involved in the cares of the world at large, to have a voice, to paint a new picture of what life looks like under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Jesus' blood purchased this world, and it all belongs to him. So whatever you do, whether you eat, whether you drink, you do all unto the glory of the Lord. As you raise up leaders in your churches, we need them to understand their work is meaningful. Engaging culture means loving people and being involved in their affairs and fleshing out the reality that Jesus has redeemed us to be a demonstration in this world that it's his, and he's coming back for it. Let me pray.